Of course, now being on probation. All right, let's go from the Pac-10 to the Big East, where it's always fashionable to take West Virginia, but Pitt's going to have something to say about that this year.
Yeah, now Pitt was the highest-rated team in the Big East last year. They finished with 10 wins and a bowl win over North Carolina. But Pitt this year did lose a lot, both offensively and defensively. They got a brand new quarterback. I think their new QB will do well. They've got Dion Lewis in the backfield. He was a freshman All-American. He almost, I vote on the Football Writers Association All-American team, and we had a little debate there at the end. He was the number 3 running back. A lot of guys pushing to make him first-team All-American as a true frosh, and he almost made it last year. So they got a good team, and they get the key game to me, West Virginia, the backyard brawl. They get it at home this year. So that's a big advantage for Pitt to have. And last year, West Virginia beat them, but it's a game Pitt really didn't care about. In fact, I talked to Coach Wanstead that week, and he said, how am I going to get my players motivated? Everything we need to do is beat Cincinnati next week. West Virginia was meaningless. If they beat Cincinnati, it was BCS bowl bid. They went out and they led Cincinnati 38-10, but they did lose to West Virginia the previous week. Now, West Virginia is going to be a threat. I think West Virginia's got the best defense in the Big East. They do have to play Pitt on the road. And here's the irony of the Big East. I have Pitt winning it because I've got them and West Virginia tying for first with Pitt winning the home game. But I've got West Virginia finishing with a better record. You look at Pitt's non-conference schedule this year. They play Utah, Miami of Florida, and Notre Dame with 2 of those games on the road. So it's a killer non-conference. So meanwhile, West Virginia's got a much easier non-conference slate. So West Virginia probably finishes with a better overall record, but I've got Pitt winning the Big East due to the fact they get the tiebreaker. And for the rest of the conference, you know, you look at Cincinnati. Butch Jones, I'm a big Butch Jones fan. He stepped in at Central Michigan for Brian Kelly and actually took that program to higher heights than Kelly had taken them. You know, the last year he had them as clearly the best team in the MAC, and they finished with a great record. He steps into a good situation here. Zach Collaros back at quarterback. Now, South Florida.
From Steubenville.
Yes. And South Florida has been an underachieving team the last couple of years under Jim Leavitt. Well, Skip Holtz steps in. The one thing Skip Holtz did at East Carolina is he took a team that was middle of the road talent-wise in CUSA, and he bagged back-to-back Conference USA titles. He gets the most out of the talent he's got on hand. Now he steps into the South Florida team, which may have arguably the best size-speed ratio of any of the Big East teams. I mean, they recruit Florida, so they've got a lot of fast guys on the team. He's in a good situation. And then the most experienced team in the Big East is Connecticut. And they just added a USC running back who was a fullback at USC, but he's my number 5 rated running back coming out of high school. And granted, at USC, he might not have been able to break into the mix because they're loaded with guys that were my number 5 running back out of high school. But at Connecticut, he might give him a pair of 1,000-yard rushers, and they could be a threat. So I think any of those 5 teams could win the Big East. But I went with Pitt and West Virginia tying for the top spot, and Pitt gaining the tiebreaker because they get that big game at home.
I see Cincinnati, of course, with the new coach, too, Jones going down to Cincinnati. I see they've got Oklahoma on their schedule.
Yeah, and, you know, a lot of folks around the country are worried about that one for Oklahoma's sake, but I'm not. Oklahoma
it's at Cincinnati.
It's at Cincinnati, but it's in Paul Brown Stadium, so it's not like it's Cincinnati's home field. So they haven't played at this stadium. And the other thing, these 2 teams just played 2 years ago. And once again, Bruce, when I tell you my magazine, you know exactly where to look on every page. That score 2 years ago was 52-26. And in that game, Cincinnati's Marty Gilliard had 2 kick returns for touchdowns. Take away the 2 kick returns for touchdowns, and that wasn't even a ball game. So I think Oklahoma will be able to go into Cincinnati and get a rather comfortable win because Oklahoma's loaded this year. And frankly, I don't feel the Big East is on par with the Big 12. You take Texas, Oklahoma, put them in the Big East, they're running the table every year. Look at who Cincinnati beat last year. They didn't really have any of those big marquee wins over major teams last season. Yes, they went 12-0 by beating up the entire Big East, but they didn't have any wins over Oklahoma or Texas type teams.
You've got Pitt tying with West Virginia, Pitt getting the BCS bid. Do they have a chance, either Pitt or West Virginia, an outside chance at the BCS championship game?
I would give it to West Virginia, despite the fact I picked Pitt, because West Virginia, as I mentioned, has got an easier non-conference schedule. Pitt has got to play Utah, Miami of Florida, Notre Dame, 2 of those games on the road, plus the Big East games, where they actually have 4 Big East road games. You know, the Big East has an unbalanced schedule with 7 opponents. You have 4 home or 4 away. Naturally, you want to draw 4 at home. And so Pitt's got 4 of those on the road, plus the tough ones. I don't know if they can run the table. But West Virginia, you know, I was looking at it, and you look at their non-conference schedule, Coastal Carolina, at Marshall, Maryland, and then at LSU. And here's the interesting part about that LSU game. Last year, LSU was a 9-4 team, But do you know that they were actually outgained last year by 23 yards per game? They only had 303 yards offense, gave up 328 yards offense. There was a lot of games they were outgained by 100 yards. Mississippi State's at their goal line at the end of the game, and they just don't get in by inches. They could easily have been a team that was 6-7 last year. I think that's a possible game for West Virginia. For West Virginia's sake, I hope it's a day game because, of course, as we know, LSU plays much better at night. But they would be the team out of the Big East that I think would have the chance.
When West Virginia had Slayton and White, I mean, they were a legitimate national championship contender. And they held the banner for the Big East proudly. One of the BCS bowl games, one year they played Georgia Tech. But the Big East scares me as a purist, Phil, in that there is also the possibility that the Big East representative could have 3 or 4 losses and get a BCS bid.
And something that I've been advocating for years, I think they should take the Mountain West Conference, which in my ratings, if you look in the front of the magazine, I rank the conferences every year. I always have the Mountain West and the Big East about dead even. I think they should take the Mountain West Conference and the Big East Conference and say, okay, your 2 conferences combined get 1 BCS bid. And if you go back and look, there's really only been maybe 1 team. Last year would have been unusual because you would have had TCU and Cincinnati both at 12-0. But I think if they did that, that would avoid that Pitt in the Fiesta Bowl thing when they played Utah and went into the game with 4 or 5 losses that year. That is not, they should have a rule where you can't get there, or make it where, okay, the Big East, you are the BCS, but if your champ has got 3 losses, then it goes to the Mountain West. They ought to do something like that, but the Mountain West plays pretty good football.
Why do they think so highly of the Big East? Because of the one year that Louisville was real good, and Rutgers was real good, and West Virginia was real good, and I'm missing a team. There was, and it might have been Pitt.
The reason is, and it might be the same reason that we see the Big 12 perhaps still being able to have a championship game with only 10 teams. And that is the NCAA grandfathers a lot of things in. So the Big East at one point had Miami of Florida, they had Virginia Tech, and they had Boston College. That was a BCS-worthy conference. And then those 3 schools left. It weakened the Big East, and the Big East somehow, some way, held on to their bowl bid, their automatic BCS bowl bid. The NCAA did not take it away despite the loss of talent that they have. Now, in their defense, the Big East played very well the next 2 years. They played beyond my expectations. In fact, they got some teams that went to big BCS bowls and played well and even won them. So I thought the Big East played very well in the field at that situation, but they were able to keep the BCS bowl bid that they had when they had the big boys in the conference.
Phil Steele and the 2010 College Football Preview. We're going to show you a couple of other publications that Phil has available to you. And when we come back, Ashley Collins has got an STO Sports Update, and we're going to dive into a couple of more conferences. The Big 12, or how many teams they're going to have in there, and also the ACC. That's next with Phil Steele.